Hello everyone and welcome to Walkway channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Uriah and I'm a history teacher in Israel. I have a second degree in national security and military, which is part of the branch of political science. Today I want to talk about, I don't want to say a fake history, but it's more like inaccurate history. The video which I will talk about today is the historian armchair's video about the Israeli-Palestinian borders. I'm today a little bit sick, so I didn't plan on doing this video today, but watching this video that I will just debunk made me much sicker, so at least I have to cure it by telling you, my dear subscribers, the truth. Now, you may think that I'm biased because I'm Israeli and you know we are at war now against the Hamas organization and other terror groups in Gaza Strip, but I will do my best to really give you the most authentic information I've got. Now, please double check me, okay? Don't believe any word I say. Don't believe also armchair say any word. Just check for yourselves, okay? I will just debunk some of the things he said which aren't true, or I will refer to things which he neglected. And this is really important because it will help you better understand the bigger picture around the Israel-Palestinian border conflicts. So, let's get started.
The end of the Ottoman Empire following the First World War left a vacuum of power in the Levant. Here, in this former Ottoman region, was the land of Palestine.
I don't really know what borders are we looking right now because it wasn't the borders before or after World War I.
Settled by a diverse population of Christians, Muslims, and Jews alike. The power vacuum was quickly filled by France and Great Britain, who secretly drafted the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916, which proposed to divide the Ottoman territories between the two powers. This contradicted the earlier McMahon-Hussein correspondence between 1915 to 1916, which stated that the area of Palestine, along with all of the Arabian Peninsula, would become part of a new pan-Arab nation,
which will be ruled by the Hashemite kingdom. How did you neglect to mention that? Only the Hashemites really took place in the rebellion against the Ottoman Empire. The rest of the Arab tribes didn't. Some of them even helped the Ottomans. So it's not for all the Arabs, but supposed to be ruled by the Hashemite family, okay, which is still rule Jordan today. But at the time it was supposed to rule all the Middle East. It's called the Grand Syrian program.
Should the Arabs agree to help Britain defeat the Ottomans. While this occurred, the influential Zionist organization had their own designs in the area. At the Paris Peace Conference of 1919, the Zionists, led by Chaim Weizmann, proposed that a Jewish homeland be established in the Palestinian territory. Their proposed borders included what would become present-day Israel, western Jordan, southwestern Syria, and southern Lebanon. No representation was afforded to the Arabs or Palestinians residing in the territory during these discussions.
What do you define as Palestinians? The Jews, the Arabs, the Christians, the Druze, all of them who lived in the land which was so-called Palestine?
For the Zionists, the settlement of Palestine was not a colonial venture, but instead a return from exile to the land of Israel, their ancient homeland. For the Palestinians, however, this distinction seemed to matter little, as Jewish immigrants began to arrive and steadily dispossess many Palestinians from their homes.
Again, which people are you calling Palestinians? Are you calling, you refer only to the Arabs here, to the Muslim Arabs. You didn't even refer here to the Christians and the Druze and the Jews or everyone else. Besides, it wasn't really the thing that really sparked those violence occurrence. Because even in the 19th century, much before the first wave of Jewish migrants under the Zionist movement encouragement, there were some clashes, very violent clashes, between Jews and Arabs. especially during the Syrian peasants' revolt against the Egyptian army, which ruled here in the first part of the 19th century. So there were lots of sacks and raping and massacring of Jews by their fellow Arabs neighbors. Before the migrants, yes, there were Jewish communities here. So you neglected it on purpose, or you just didn't know about it? Well, I'm not attacking you personally. I will attack your arguments. And also, you said many Jews dispossessed the Palestinians from their lands. No, they did not dispossess them. They just bought the land from them. How the hell buying a land is dispossessing someone? And it's like I buy myself a home very soon if I will have the money for that. Does it mean that I will dispossess the other person from his home? No. This is a trade. Yeah, I know they want it to be sound like that, but it wasn't. And besides, you just have to look at the land the Jews just bought at the time. They bought land it was really, really difficult to live in this land because it was infested with malaria carrying mosquitoes, and there were a lot of swamps and deserts, and it was really unsuitable for farming, or at least they thought so. And farming, agriculture, that was the thing at the time.
Despite these concerns, the Zionists appeared to have the upper hand, thanks to the implicit approval of the British government. The most telling example of this support for Jewish settlement in Palestine occurred in 1917, when British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour sent a declaration of support to Lord Walter Rothschild, a banker, politician, and prominent Zionist leader. The nature of the Balfour Declaration would become public on November 9th of that year, when it was published in the British press.
Yeah, because the British also wanted another faction to help them. They wanted the Jews to help them as well. That's why they also gave them a promise, which they didn't really promise to keep, but let's be honest, they were in a very dire situation and they needed help. They couldn't really penetrate the defense line put by the Ottomans. So they needed more help from the inside. But what you see here isn't what the Balfour Declaration was about. The Balfour Declaration included only this part, until this border here. They also promised the Jews all the Transjordan. Let's continue and see what happened.
Ultimately, the final decision regarding Palestine was a blend of Zionist aspirations and British geopolitical interests. Britain's strategic aims in neighboring Egypt, especially around the Suez Canal, aligned with the Zionist vision for a Jewish homeland. This shared vision
How come the Zionist movement was aimed to bring a Jewish state, not a British state, around the Suez Canal? Besides, the Suez Canal is in Egypt. It wasn't, and Sinai wasn't included in the treaties with the Jews anyway. So how the Jewish state will align with the British interest of the Suez Canal?
led to the creation of the British-controlled Mandatory Palestine, which encompassed the territories of modern-day Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza.
All the Middle East was ruled at the time by British and French regimes. So not only the land of Palestine. Egypt will get its independence soon enough, and also Iraq in 1932, and Transjordan will get its independence in 1946, and Lebanon and Syria pretty much in 1936, but it will be fully independent only in 1946 as well, by the French, of course. So only Palestine will be left under British control in 1947. So we will get back to it, but just so you know, all the Middle East was part of the British and the French rule, not only the land of Palestine, and not only because of the Jews and Arabs there, but because they wanted it, because they had an agreement, like you said before, in the Sykes-Picot Agreement.
As the years under British governance rolled on, discord between the Jewish and Arab communities.
And yes, you read it right. The British and the French divided the Middle East between themselves, while they promised, the British promised both the Jews and Arabs a state, and they gave neither side what it deserved, at least for a while. However, what this historian didn't mention is that there was an agreement, or at least a theoretical agreement, between Chaim Weizmann, which was an official of the Zionist movement, and the King Faisal, which was one of the leaders of the Arab revolt against the Ottomans, who helped the British a lot. They signed a peace treaty which concludes the Jews will come to Palestine and they will establish a state of their own. The Arabs will acknowledge that, and the Jews will help the Hashemite kingdom to establish their own Arab country around the Middle East. It was supposed to be a really big country, included Syria and Lebanon and Iraq and Transjordan, everything, and of course Arabia itself, the Arabian Peninsula, which wasn't really fulfilled because the British didn't keep their promise for neither side, but it was supposed to be like that, and there was almost a peace treaty which could really last for long. Let's see what happened next.
Communities soon broke out, with each side nurturing national aspirations that often clashed. The Balfour Declaration of 1917 continued to fuel Zionist immigration and land purchases, exacerbating tensions with the indigenous Arab population. In 1936, these tensions
How did you jump straight to 1936? How did you not mention the clashes of the 1920s? Especially in 1929, where there was really big terror attack by the Arabs, mainly in Hebron, but also in Safad and many other cities against the Jews and even against the British. How did you neglect to mention that? Also, he neglected to mention that there was a leader on the Arab side, which was called Haj Amin al-Husseini, and he was a real anti-Jews and anti-British leader. He was appointed by the British, ironically, but he worked against them all the time. And he was a pretty religious one, of course, and he also cooperated with the Nazis at some point. We will get back to it in a moment, but let's continue to see what about the 1936 revolt, which was a really tough one by the Arabs. They revolt both against the Jews and the British. They started with strikes, but then they moved to violence.
Exploded with the Arab Revolt against both the British Mandate and Jewish immigrants settling in the region.
Not against only Jewish immigrants, let's be honest. It was against all Jewish in the land of Palestine. Okay? Of course, it was also against some Arabs as well. Yes, Arabs killed Arabs, and I will get back to it in a moment.
In an attempt to quell the unrest, the British proposed several solutions, including the partition of Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states. The proposed borders gave the Jewish state about 1/3 of Palestine, including the Galilee, the Jezreel Valley, and the coastal plain, while the Arab state received Judea, Samaria, and the Negev Desert. However, the plan was met with mixed reactions. The Jewish community was divided, but more inclined toward acceptance, while Arab leaders denounced the proposal, refusing the idea of land partition and population transfer.
What population transfer?
While the seeds for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict were planted in the aftermath of the First World War, the recent violence is the result of decades of deep mistrust and animosity between both sides. In the shadow of these failed proposals, extremist factions emerged, fueled by deep-seated grievances.
No, the extremist factions already rose to power long ago. You just again neglected it. Even the leader of the Arabs at the time, the Mufti of Jerusalem, Haj Amin al-Husseini, which was appointed by the British, was the most extremist one. And he led the revolt of 1936. They were already there, at least in the Arab side. In the Jewish side, they only started to emerge at the time. And also, you forgot to mention that the number of Arabs who were killed by their fellow Arabs in the revolt were twice the number of the Arabs who were killed by Jewish militias and the British Army combined. So they were murdered mainly because they didn't want to take part in the revolt. They just wanted to live their lives. But there were also some clashes in between those factions themselves. Well, like it's always been, like it's today. Let's continue. Let's see which emergent factions he talks about.
Groups like the Irgun and Stern Gang.
Irgun and Stern Gang. Oh my God, I can't even hear those silly names in English anymore. Let's just translate it as it is. This is what you call Irgun. You see, in Hebrew it's called Etzel, which is a short term for Irgun Tzva'i Leumi. In English it's like the National Military Organization. Irgun, it's like organization. That's stupid. And the Stern Gang, well, it's known as the Stern Gang, but its real name is Lechi, which means Lochamei Cherut Israel. In English it's like Fighters for the Freedom of Israel. This is the real name. And he also neglected to mention that there were more organizations, and it was the Haganah, which means the defense in English. It was a legal organization, and it was recognized by the British. However, it had also a military branch which called the Palmach, which was the elite forces. Palmach means Plugot HaMachatz. In English, it's called the strike companies. And by the way, the Haganah was the biggest and the strongest and the most brutal one of all the three. So, again, you neglected to mention it because the narrative says that only the Etzel and the Lechi were the extremists, which, again, it's debatable. They were more violent in some places, but they weren't more brutal than the Haganah. Okay, they just had a different perspective. He didn't explain why they were formed in the first place. The Etzel was formed because the Haganah was a really passive organization. It means, at the time at least, it only waited for the Arabs to attack and then repel the attacks. The Etzel wanted to take the fight to them and to ambush them as soon as they get out from their village to raid the Jewish settlements. Those people who wanted to initiate this, they didn't have a lot of support from the Haganah, so they retired from the Haganah and established the Etzel. That's how it happened. And as for the Lechi, it was formed at the same time pretty much, also retired and established their own organization, but it became more noticeable during World War II, where the Etzel and the Haganah joined forces with the British to repel the Nazis from invading Israel during their campaign in Egypt, and the Lechi still continued to fight the British because they violated the treaties with the Jews. And this organization hoped that the Nazis will send more Jews to Israel instead of killing them in exchange for fighting against the British, which was, again, debatable, but that's what they did. This is why those organizations were established. They weren't bloodthirsty rebels. They just wanted to act differently from the Haganah, which was the main force. But after the Arab Revolt, and again, he neglected to mention it, the British started to really withdraw from their treaties with the Jews. They started to limit the amount of Jews who can enter Israel, and the land, what you call Palestine. And they also limited the land purchases by Jews. And an Arab which was caught selling land to a Jew was executed. Not by the British, but by the Arab leadership. And it's still today the truth in the West Bank, by the way. But I will get to that later. It should be noticed that it was the time of Hitler in Germany, and the Jews were very in a bad situation, so they have to run away, and almost no country in the world accepted them, even not the British, and even not to the promised land, the land they promised to the Jews in the Balfour Declaration. So I don't know really how to say it, but the British just broke the deal. So the Jews started to struggle against them in many different ways. I will get to that.